All right, thanks for joining us for another edition of the Muscle Media 2000 Audiotape Interview Series. And this month's guest is Mike Mentzer, once again. And Mike, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you well.
Okay. I have to tell you, you were not the planned guest for this month's interview, but I got so much mail, and I got so many responses from people who listened to our first conversation a couple months ago, and they had so many questions, and they were so excited about this this new training concept that, you know, it's kind of a popular demand type of issue. So here we are again.
Right.
Why do you think people got so excited from that first interview? Because I've never seen anything like it.
Well, I have to say here too, I was more than pleasantly surprised by the response to that tape. While I had delivered the information in such a way to have a certain impact, the impact was much greater than I ever dreamed it would be, in terms of both volume and intensity of response. And I thought about it quite a bit, analyzed it from different angles, and found it quite fascinating, actually. It has been averred by too many people too many times, Bill, that all bodybuilders are dumb. A dumb person is one who doesn't know the truth if it slaps him in the face. The response to my tape proved that not all bodybuilders are dumb. In fact, they are far from it.
Right.
As clear as I was on that tape, it takes at least a fairly well-developed mind to follow the long trains of reasoning that I used. Many who responded couldn't clearly verbalize what it was they liked, but I realized in analyzing later on that what they were responding to were in fact their own values. Aristotle defined a friend as that other person, that one in whom we see ourselves. Those who responded positively to that tape value knowledge, science, reason, the mind, and human progress. Right.
Well, that makes sense. You had some extraordinary cases of, like excitement. I mean,
yeah. As a matter of fact, I just talked to a guy this morning who claimed that since he first received that tape several months ago, he's listened to it at least 15 to 20 times, and that is not an unusual statement. I didn't keep an accurate count here, of course, but I've had so many people call me and tell me that they've listened to the tape at least a dozen times that I'm actually quite shocked. I've been joking about it now. I say, yeah, listening to Mike Mentzer is better than listening to Michael Jackson.
Right.
Some people had experienced fairly intense emotions and even grew almost lyrically mystical about it, claiming they became addicted to listening it, actually addicted to it, doing so at home, in the gym with their training partners, and in their cars on the way to work.
Right.
What they liked, actually, was the meticulous use of logic and the broad philosophical scientific context in which they heard bodybuilding, their great passion, discussed, and the crystal clear understanding, of course, which this helped them to achieve.
Right. No, I think that there's something going on, and like I said, that's why, we're going to go back and we're going to go over some of the points that we talked about in the first tape in this interview, and we're going to, take it a step further. But it is fascinating, and I will admit that I didn't expect people to become, that outrageously enthusiastic about another.
It caused a sensation of sorts. If, I was just dreaming the other day that it would be great if 200,000 bodybuilders could hear that tape. It would cause a dramatic revolution in the sport.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mike. Many more people need to, get this information, but that's what we're trying to do with the tapes. And I'll tell our listeners, who are also Muscle Media 2000 subscribers, that there's an article about you that's pretty interesting in the next issue of Muscle Media 2000, and we hope to get your input on a regular basis so that we can share this message with more people about how to really train for size and strength gains. Can you tell me a little bit about where you think some of the ill-conceived ideas that are so, prevalent in weight training today came from?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, this is an issue I've given some considerable thought to recently. Quite a few of the people who call me, Bill, are still reluctant to fully let go of what they used to believe about bodybuilding. they're having a little bit of a hard time fully accepting what they heard on the first tape, despite its clarity and logic. I tell those people that in order to be able to successfully discard from their subconscious all those ideas that are hampering them, clashing with these new ideas they heard on the tape, it might be beneficial if I pointed out to them where those ideas came from, the old ideas.
Right.
In fact, the basic premises which shape the thought and determine the actions of the vast majority of bodybuilders today, Bill, originated in the early part of this century with the man who was responsible for starting the weightlifting bodybuilding movement in this country, Bob Huffman. In the 1920s, Bob Huffman decided that he would manufacture and sell barbells. Of course, along with the barbells, he had to provide a training manual. Having but a fair to middling education, with little or nothing in the areas of science, philosophy, logic, Bob Huffman, like everybody else for whom that is true, was victim to the power of tradition. Something I learned reading Ayn Rand in philosophy recently is that the power of chance, accident, and tradition, the role of chance, accident, and tradition in a person's life stands in inverse ratio to the power of that individual's philosophical equipment. For those of you who really love the philosophy, and there were a lot of those, by the way. Bob Huffman was an old-fashioned, traditional kind of a guy. In our culture, the number 3 has a certain traditional magic. For instance, there's 3 square meals a day. There's 3 sides to a triangle. There's the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Things like that. Traditional ideas. In formulating a training methodology, Bob Huffman said everybody train 3 times a week. Why not? It seems to be a number that works so well in so many other areas. The point here is that science has nothing to do with the arbitrary, including tradition. Many of our traditional beliefs are actually arbitrary or based on convenience. I tell those people who have a hard time working with some of these new ideas, look where these ideas came from. Where did Bob Huffman get the idea of 3? Because we eat 3 square meals a day. There's a Father, Son, a Holy Ghost. There's pyramid power. Some people actually believe there's a special magic with a pyramid or a triangle. That's mystical. It has nothing to do with science. Why didn't Bob Huffman suggest everyone train 3 times a month, in fact? Another good point. Because 99% of the people in this country and all over the world plan their lives short range in terms of a week. Many of the people that I've talked to on the phone who have heard this and came to understand it found it easier to discard some of that old stuff. They took my advice, the advice I gave on the first tape. They discarded what they thought they knew. They're taking a fresh, new, unobstructed look at this thing. They're willing to experiment, work with these new ideas, and are, in fact, training only 2 to 3 times each month for each body part. And in almost every single case, they're reporting at least satisfactory progress, and in some cases dramatic, and in other cases even phenomenal progress.
So that would be every body part like once every 10 days?
Yeah, or even less frequently.
Wow.
You see, the point that I made on the first tape is perhaps one I should emphasize again here. More is not really better. That really should be thoroughly pretend you never even heard that idea. Take a fresh, new, unobstructed look at this thing. Why shouldn't you train necessarily 2 or 3 times? I'm not saying that is definitely the best way to do it, but if you understand where those other beliefs came from, and you understand the necessity of taking a fresh, new, unobstructed look at this thing, why not give serious consideration to the idea of training each body part only 2 or 3 times a month? Why not?
No logical reason.
There's no reason. I'm emphasizing all of this only because of the reluctance, again, of some people to embrace these new ideas or to give them any serious consideration at all.
Right. Well, I think that that is the big thing. A lot of people are saying, well, Mike is probably right in a way, but I'm probably right in a way also.
Right in a way? Hold on a second. I don't grant anybody the premise that there's somebody else out there who has given this thing more serious consideration than I have. If he's out there, Billy's hiding. I'm not saying I've got the ultimate or final answer, but I have no doubt I'm going in the right direction. If you can come up with one single individual who can point out a contradiction in my logic, I'll give you $1,000 because I'd like to learn too. I'm not saying that I'm omniscient or infallible. Again, I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I'm certain about what I'm certain about.
Right.
It not only is true in theory, this stuff works in practice.
Yeah.
A lot of people are still continuing to say it only works for Mike Mentzer and Casey Viator and perhaps now Dorian Yates. That is not true, but if it did work even just for one person, don't you think, dear listener, it would be at least worth trying? If for no other reason, then you could save all that time in the gym. Right. To go a little bit further, by the way, with this idea of traditional beliefs and where most bodybuilders get their ideas, the ideas that shape their thinking and guide their actions in the gym. Not too long after Bob Hoffman was on the scene, perhaps 15 to 20 years, a guy named Joe Weider came along. Joe Weider didn't like the fact that this old-fashioned fuddy-duddy, Bob Hoffman over there in York, Pennsylvania, had such a stranglehold on the market. Joe Weider wanted to wrest some of the market away from him. He said, I'm progressive. I'm a progressive individual. Don't train 3 times a week. More is better. Train 6 days a week. But he wasn't that progressive because he still suggested everybody take Sunday off for Sabbath.
Right.
Very scientific.
So this is just fueling. I mean, now people are doing, everyday training and sometimes 2 times a day training. I mean, is it, despite what you've been trying to get across, people are just continuing to train more and more from where I stand?
Well, there is that particular element. There are those bodybuilders who apparently never came to identify the role or nature or value of logic, reason, science in their lives, and I mean that literally. There are those individuals for whom you can paint a picture so clear a blind man or idiot could understand it, but it has no impact in their consciousness. Their actions are guided primarily by what they see others doing, and we talked about this on the first tape. Right. Most people are, in fact, intellectually dependent, and a lot of bodybuilders are. I've made this argument very clearly in all of my articles, all of my books, and seminars all over the world, and apparently a lot of people just don't understand the power, the crucial importance of a logical argument. Again, they do what they do based on what they see other people doing. Well, how could Mike Mentzer be right? Why should he be so certain when, in fact, everybody else seems to be doing it quite differently? Just the other day in Gold's Gym, a man said that to me. Why are you so darn certain? And I said, well, aren't you certain that 2 and 2 is 4? Why are you pissed off that I'm certain about this? Why can't I be? If you're certain that 2 and 2 is 4, I can be certain about this, and I am certain. If you would take the time and listen to the logic of my argument and find one contradiction, I'll throw the whole damn thing out. This stuff is literally true. If NASA, the Space Administration, can send a man to the moon and bring him back successfully each time, then why can't we succeed with each one of our missions to the gym? Why can't we build muscles here on Earth?
Right.
There is a science of exercise, people. There really is. I said that on the last tape, and I've been telling a lot of people since, and I see now quite clearly, Bill, that a lot of this has to do with a failure of people to integrate their knowledge. We all know that NASA exists. We all know that there's a science of medicine and a science of astronomy, a science of physics and mathematics. In mathematics, 2 and 2 is 4. I don't care how big the arm of the guy is who asserts it's 5, it's still 4. There is a scientific approach to exercise too, people. There really is. I know you've been reading those muscle magazines and becoming mesmerized by the pictures of all those great bodybuilders. And as a result, you're forgetting to use the knowledge you gained in grammar school, high school, college. There is a science of medicine. The science of exercise, like I said on the first tape, like the science of medicine, is based on principles of human physiology. They apply to everybody.
What about the group of people, and this is what I've discovered, is that they're saying, well, I've been doing 15 sets, and Mike says to do 1. So I think that I would be ahead if I cut down to 5 or 6. I mean, is that any benefit to these people?
Well, they're better off if for no other reason than they're not so severely overtrained and possibly damaging their body, and they're saving some time. But they're missing one crucial point here. We're not just looking to do less or to do what feels just about right. What we're looking for here, Bill and listener, is the precise amount of exercise required. As I said on the first tape, too, science is an exacting discipline. A proper science of bodybuilding, therefore, should tell the individual exactly how many sets to do. The muscle magazines continue to advocate that everybody do 12 to 20. That's not very exact. Is it 12 or is it 20? It's not exact at all, and therefore it's not scientific. Science, as I said a moment ago, is an exacting discipline. Imagine we're down there with my favorite people, NASA, at Houston Headquarters Control, NASA, before a manned moon launch. And the director yells down at the end of the control module, "Hey, Fred, why don't you try throwing a blue switch this time instead of a red one? Let's see what happens." You think they'd ever get to the moon? See my point when I say science is an exact discipline? Perhaps a better analogy here is this. Bill, if you were going to go into surgery tomorrow, you would very much want your anesthesiologist to give you the precise amount of anesthesia necessary. Any more than that, you would grow toxic and possibly die. The point is this. The human being is a specific entity with specific characteristics and specific requirements. The key concept there is specific. I call my approach to bodybuilding, Bill, a rational approach. The basis of a rational approach to bodybuilding, or any other arena of human endeavor actually, is the recognition that only the specific appropriate knowledge can lead one to engage in the purposeful action required to successfully achieve a goal. I came to understand recently, during a period of more serious thought on this, that in fact the concept of specificity is the most important concept in science. The concept of specificity shapes and underlies the phenomena of rationality itself. Why is life today, Bill, in the 1990s so much better in so many ways than it was 50, 100, or 500 years ago? Because of science. Because of science. The purpose of science is to identify the facts of reality. From those facts derive a theory whose principles serve as a guideline for successful action. This is what I'm trying to get across to people. Something which I consider crucially important and that will help elevate the entire sport or industry of bodybuilding in the public's eye and in the eyes of the scientific medical community. The way it's being practiced now, the way it's being written about now, the way it's being thought about now, is so gall darn stupid, Bill. I can't believe that these people are so impervious to reason. Most people are living not in a dark age, but in a black hole. Remember the dark ages of 500 years ago? The dark ages was a period when mankind's progress broke down. People turned away from the teachings of Aristotle. That is, they rejected logic, reason, knowledge, progress, and even freedom. When you reject reason, science, and progress, you also lose your freedom as an end result. After the Dark Ages came a Renaissance. The term Renaissance literally means rebirth, the rebirth of reason. The Renaissance was that period during which men returned to the teachings of Aristotle, the man who defined the laws of logic, identified the principles of thought. He was the man who discovered the scientific method. Up until recently, bodybuilding was caught up in a dark ages of its own. It wasn't until about 1969, 1970, with the emergence of Arthur Jones on the scene, that we exited the Dark Age and emerged into a renaissance of our own. Arthur Jones was and is a man of reason. He understood the requirements of logic, the requirements of developing a theory. He did develop a theory which was validated by myself and many people. We couldn't find any contradictions in the logic. We also used it. We proved empirically that it does work. But as happened after Aristotle, the first Aristotle, his works were lost, and people did go into a dark age. Now, it's possible that the entire world of bodybuilding will fail to see the enormous importance of what Arthur Jones especially has contributed and what I'm attempting to perpetuate and expand upon by providing a broader philosophic scientific context within which to view bodybuilding. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you talk about...
I don't want to sound too professorial here, but this is obviously a subject that people value quite passionately.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to be assured of succeeding, then they have to acquire the specific appropriate knowledge necessary.
Right. Now, you talk about the... I know that you've studied all the way... bodybuilding, way back, and I think you said one time it, really originated in ancient Greece. I mean, what is your...
Well, that's something else a lot of bodybuilders don't know, and it's a very interesting point. The activity, the phenomena of bodybuilding itself arose 2,300 years ago in the age of classical Greek. The concept of philosophy itself arose at the same time with Plato.
Uh-huh.
Plato was the man who identified the concept of philosophy itself and pointed out that there are crucial issues which pertain to philosophy, issues like what is reality, what is knowledge, how does man gain it and validate it. In the years since the classical Greeks, philosophy has undergone a dramatic deterioration. There was a little bright spark there during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, but now here in the 1990s, the late 20th century, we're back into not just a dark age, but a black hole. People, once again, are failing to understand the values of knowledge, reason, logic, science, human progress, and freedom. It's only within a philosophical context that people can gain the knowledge required to achieve their goals. Remember, the basis of a rational approach to bodybuilding is the recognition that only the specific appropriate knowledge can lead one to engage in the purposeful action required to successfully achieve a goal. It would help a whole lot if an individual took some time to study what knowledge itself is. How can you know that the ideas guiding you are valid if you don't know how to distinguish truth from falsehood? Again, I'm pointing all this out because I see this as my role in bodybuilding. I see myself as the voice of reason, bringing a wide-scale philosophic, scientific context to all this. And if there are those of you who think I'm sounding too professorial or this is too intellectual, then you have my best wishes because you're lost. This is what human life is about, people, knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And what would you recommend for people who... I've gotten some letters from people who want to, get more into, the things that you are studying. I mean, the philosophy and stuff. You study Rand?
Right.
And
Ayn Rand is not the only, but the major philosopher of the 20th century who has brought back to our awareness the crucial importance of Aristotle, the man who, again, identified the laws of logic, defined the principles of thought, discovered scientific method. He pointed out that man needs a method of cognition, a method of thinking. Logic is that method. Logic is a method for using your mind. If you don't learn how to use it, then you're going to be lost. You will be not subject, but victim to all manner of false ideas. Bill, you and I are old enough to know that the entire world, including the world of bodybuilding, is literally awash in a sea of false ideas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, what about people who want to get more information on Rand? I mean, is that books?
Yeah. If a given individual listening is interested in studying philosophy, very, very careful. Ideas are crucially important. Ayn Rand pointed out that philosophy is the wholesaler of man's affair. Everything we're doing even now, Bill, is philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is explicit. It's clearly verbalized. Involved in what we're doing are a lot of implicit ideas. One of the most interesting one, which comes from romantic philosophy. We do love knowledge. Those listening to the tape do love knowledge. That implies that they value their life. If you value knowledge, then you value your means of survival, which is your mind. If you value your means of survival, then you value your life. This is how interesting philosophy can get. If you're interested, listener, in studying philosophy at all, be careful. Ideas are crucially important. The wrong idea can lead you down the wrong path, as happened in, of course, pre-World War II Germany. There was a reason why the Nazis took over. It was pointed out in a book recently by Dr. Leonard Peikoff, Ayn Rand's Intellectual Error, that before every dictator's takeover, that dictator undertakes a campaign to literally destroy the people's confidence in reason, in knowledge. Hitler literally hired a bunch of writers, a bunch of quacks to disseminate information whose ultimate purpose was to undermine people's confidence in their own ability to think and perceive reality. A dictator cannot take over in a country, Bill, where people are independent, i.e. know how to think for themselves. What is independence? In order to become an independent individual, you have to learn how to think so you can deal with reality successfully.
Mm-hmm.
People who are dependent are people who don't know how to think.
Yeah, that's true. So
be careful, people. That was my point. I would suggest rather than just jumping into philosophy blindly by caprice, you be very careful and start out with Ayn Rand. Just as there is and can be, Bill, only one valid theory of bodybuilding or one valid theory of medicine, astronomy, physics, it's also true there can only be one valid theory of life. Man's life, man himself has a specific nature. You can only formulate a valid working theory of life if you understand man's nature, and that was Ayn Rand's passion. Her passion was man's consciousness. She understood that man is in fact the divine spark in the great chain of being. Man is the highest of all living species. We are the intelligent, creative force in the world. Man said, let there be light, and now all we got to do is switch on a light.
Mm-hmm. So, libraries?
Yeah, her books can be found in libraries, but she's becoming quite popular, and her books can be found in most bookstores. She was, in addition to being a philosopher, Bill, a novelist, and her philosophy is contained in her novels. The two most famous being The Fountainhead, which was made into a movie at one time, and also Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged can appear a bit formidable to a beginner in this area. It's about 1,200 pages. So if you're interested, listener, in getting involved in philosophy and reading Ayn Rand, I suggest you start with one of her novels, The Fountainhead. In addition, what you might consider doing actually concurrently to reading that is reading one of her books of essays on philosophy. Probably the best place to start would be Philosophy, Who Needs It? A good question. Many people regard philosophy rather gingerly as nothing more than a bauble of the intellect, as Leonard Peikoff pointed out. In fact, it's the most crucial factor or power in human life. Think about it seriously. What is it that's guiding us today? What has allowed Bill Phillips to become more successful than so many other people? He's got a philosophy. He's identified the value of productive work, using his mind, searching for truth, learning how to distinguish truth from falsehood. That's his philosophy, whether he has stated it explicitly or just leaves it to being implicit. But I'm sure he has done that at different times, and all of you have listening to this tape. At some point in their lives, most people have identified the values of logic, reason, knowledge, progress, freedom. These are all ideas. The problem is, very often people identify those things, and then they're so caught up in the dramatic rush of events in their daily life, they fail to identify one crucial idea that would really help them in this area, and that is the importance of defining their philosophy. They go, yeah, okay, I like that idea. I understand knowledge is very important, but then they forget it, and they fail to take the time to study knowledge and find out what it's really all about.
This is fascinating stuff.
Philosophy is about ideas. What we're doing today, everything that we do on this tape, everything you did in your last tape with Brad Jeffries was an exchange of ideas. Ideas are the wholesaler of man's affairs. The efficacy of an individual's actions depend on whether or not his ideas are true or false, right or wrong, consistent or inconsistent, rational or irrational. How can you discover whether or not the ideas guiding you in your life are true or false, right or wrong? By studying philosophy. This is the purpose of philosophy, to define knowledge, provide man with a means of cognition or thinking, provide him with a means of distinguishing truth from falsehood, provide him with a means or a method of establishing the criteria of what he may rightfully accept as knowledge. This is the most crucial fact in human life. Do you think they would have gotten to the moon successfully if they hadn't taken ideas seriously? Science is not just something for people in white lab coats running around the NASA building or in medical labs. Science is a way of thinking. It's a way of understanding and viewing the world. You don't have to be a genius or a professional intellectual to do it. Philosophy is actually fun. The problem is that in most of our public schools, we are taught to associate learning with drudgery, boredom.
Right.
That's the problem. You have to reprogram your computer, people. You have to identify explicitly the value of knowledge in your life and make it fun. What could be more ingenious? What could be more exciting than waking up every day enthusiastic to go out there and look for more knowledge? Like the Buddha did. Remember the Buddha?
Yeah.
Phillips, I'll bet, I know you as little as I do, I'll bet there was a time when you read about the Buddha and you got excited.
Yeah, no, I think
You even identified with him. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
But you probably gave up on philosophy because, in fact, the Buddhist philosophy is a lot of hogwash, too. There are certain romantic elements to it. There is and can be only one valid theory of philosophy, and Ayn Rand had the greatest mind in the history of the human race. She thoroughly identified the value, nature, principles, role of philosophy in human life, and she has a lot of people in this world actually quite excited. Imagine that here in the 20th century, the greatest mind in the history of the human race came along and actually for the first time defined what knowledge itself is. She realized at one point in her life that she wanted to integrate as much knowledge into her mind as she possibly could. She was smart enough to realize that as a precondition, she had to know what knowledge itself was. That's really getting serious about thinking.
Yeah, that's for
Take
sure.
the time and identify what the concept of knowledge itself is. How can you know that you have valid knowledge in bodybuilding if you don't know what knowledge is? I hope this is not scaring anybody. This is supposed to be exciting.
It's fascinating, and I'll say that again. It is absolutely gripping because, it's just something you don't hear from too many people. Not too many people have a real passion for knowledge, and
Well, as I said on the first tape too, we live in a militantly anti-rational culture where people are actively discouraged from thinking.
It's true.
Why? Because many of our schools for the last 30 or 40 years have been using the teaching methods of John Dewey, the progressive education method. John Dewey was militantly anti-cognitive, anti-conceptual. He believed that teaching children to think was literally an unnatural burden. He believed that children should be brought to school to give free expression to their natural impulses, which is a bunch of garbage. Why should you let children who are already wild be left unrestrained and give vent to their so-called natural impulses. Beyond that, he said the purpose of education was to teach children to conform to society. And as Ayn Rand pointed out, what does that mean? To cruelty, injustice, murder, mockery, snobs, pretentiousness. That's what we see about us today in society. And even back then when John Dewey was advocating his theory, I came to find out recently, quite interestingly, that the man who funded the progressive education movement in this country, the man who gave a tremendous impetus to John Dewey's educational movement, was David Rockefeller, whose purpose is to start a one-world government. Now remember, John Dewey's philosophy is militantly anti-cognitive, anti-conceptual. He literally didn't want to teach children to think. He wanted to stultify their minds, hamper, cripple them as much as he possibly fucking could, so that possibly David Rockefeller could take over the world. Remember, Hitler wasn't the first one to use this, but Hitler raised it to an art form. Hitler literally hired writers to print and distribute pamphlets and books undermining the populace's confidence in reason, making them dependents, like children, be led by a strong paternalistic government. That's what a dictatorship is, people. This stuff is starting to scare me a little bit because I see it so darn clear. Mm-hmm. I suspect Arthur Jones did too. He told me a while back that when he was in his 30s and 40s, he started enlightening himself and started to see what was going on in this world politically. We are literally, this whole world is going in the direction of statist tyranny. How is it to be achieved? Through philosophy, by undermining people's confidence in the power of their own minds. Don't think for yourself. Be led by a strong paternalistic government.
Right.
So, of course, philosophy, as important as it is in helping an individual decide on what kind of a bodybuilding routine to perform, it has social implications.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Most people, how are you going to know what's going on in the world if you don't know what's going on in the bodybuilding world? And most bodybuilders don't know a damn thing about bodybuilding. This scares me a little bit. Most bodybuilders passionately value this thing, Bill. You know that. They're so darn fanatic, it's almost funny. In one sense, it's actually kind of endearing because they're so romantic about it. They so much value their lives. They want to achieve goals.
Right.
But they don't know how to think about it. If they haven't learned how to think about bodybuilding itself, do you think they've taken the time to look out into the world around them and learn to identify what's going on out there either?
Yeah. No.
This is what happened to the people in pre-World War II Germany. That's how they got led into fascism and Nazism. They couldn't identify what was going on before it was too late. You see this?
Oh, yeah. No, I see what you're talking about.
If you find this boring, dear listener, then you have my best wishes again, because we're talking about life here as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. But
and all of this, even if you forget about it 10 minutes from now, it'll come up in your minds again. Learning to look out and understand life in general makes achieving your bodybuilding goals a lot more exciting too. If all you do is achieve bodybuilding goals, or come to understand bodybuilding, then you're in kind of a vacuum. There's a big world out there and you can't ignore it. You will continually feel the pressure of that world on you if you don't take the time to sit down, learn how to think about it, identify it, and evaluate it. There will always be that pressure. You will know that you're failing somewhere in your life. You'll feel an odd sense of guilt. Mm-hmm. This stuff is fun. Learn to look out in the world. By learning how to identify what you see, it becomes much less frightening. Remember when you were a kid, Bill, you screamed when there was lightning?
Oh, yeah.
And thunder? Now, what caused you not to be afraid of it? You gained the knowledge that it was a natural phenomenon. It wasn't something mysterious or magical or mystical that you should be frightened of. As soon as your parents or your teachers told you what it was, as soon as you gained a scientific understanding of that aspect of the universe, it failed to frighten you.
Right.
This is why knowledge is so important.
But you mentioned Arthur Jones. Was he into philosophy, or just was he just a thinker by nature?
No. Arthur Jones told my brother a long time ago, and I'll quote him here exactly. He said when he was in his 30s, he was tremendously emotionally fucked up. Something happened in his life in his late 30s, early 40s. I have every reason to believe that he literally discovered Ayn Rand and or Aristotle. I have no doubt it had to be that. He understood that there was something going on inside of him that he couldn't understand, he didn't like. He said he was I don't like to use the term fucked up too often, but he did say that. He said, I was emotionally fucked up. He sought to understand the reasons for it. He wanted to learn how to think about what was going on inside of him. And this is the inner state of most people today. A lot of you who are listening are becoming quite intensely interested now because you're identifying with some of this stuff. I've had my problems too. The only way you can come to understand your problems, your emotions, your thinking, is to learn how to think. This requires a certain type of discipline which only philosophy can teach you.
And it's not even a required course in high school or college.
No, it's again, it's regarded rather gingerly by most people in the teaching profession. When you bring the subject up to most people, they giggle or titter and think that perhaps you have an emotional problem.
Right. Mike, Mike, you left off with, explaining the importance of thinking and being independent and developing yourself in that way, intellectually, and how that can reflect on, your success in bodybuilding and all things in life, I think. One of the questions that I like to bat around when I get a chance is, why do you think it is, and I don't know if you have any thought on this or whatever, but why do you think it is that people want to build their bodies to begin with? Especially, and I can say those guys, but you were one of those guys, Mike. You were freaking huge.
Yeah.
And strong.
Well, why shouldn't they want to build their bodies? When Sir Edmund Hillary was asked why he climbed Mount Everest, he said because it was there.
Yeah.
Well, what's most immediate to people? Their bodies. There's nothing wrong in taking care of your body or even wanting to build it, as long as it doesn't become a preoccupation and take your focus away from the development of the mind. It was the ancient Greeks. It was in the age of classical Greece, 23 centuries ago, that the dictum, a healthy mind and a healthy bodybuilding, arose.
And so
there's nothing wrong with building the body as long as you don't miss that most crucial factor or element, the mind.
Why is it that so many people have to take drugs in bodybuilding?
They don't have to. Nobody puts a gun to their head.
Yeah, that's true.
We do have volition. We have free will.
Why is it so many people?
It's their value system.
Yeah.
They haven't learned to think.
Well,
actually, I'm not so sure necessarily that drugs are bad for people. I'm not against the advancements of medical science. If I were convinced that steroids were so terribly bad, I wouldn't have taken them myself. They can be bad without a doubt, just like aspirin can be bad.
Right.
People have a very difficult time thinking about this issue because of the hysteria, the public hysteria going on about steroids, especially in the press. There's no doubt that there have been abuses of steroids, and steroids, like any other drug, can be abused and lead to bad physical results. But yeah, most bodybuilders think that they have to take them, and once they decide to, they don't give it much thought. They take them indiscriminately, using, again, the almost childlike notion. More jelly beans are better than less. Then why not take more steroids?
Right.
More is better. Why not do more sets? Train 2 to 4 hours a day. Train twice a day. Train 6 or 7 days a week. Take all the steroids you can possibly financially afford. You see how childlike an approach to life this is?
Right.
There are more principles guiding human life than the idea that more is better. That is an ethical economic principle, as I pointed out in the first tape. You can't achieve success in a different context or another context without studying that context in and of itself and deriving principles therefrom, principles that will serve as guidelines for effective or successful human action. You can't take principles from one context and apply them blindly and uncritically in another one and expect to achieve any results at all necessarily. That's a very childlike approach to life. You have that one idea embedded in your subconscious from childhood. More is better. Then you apply it blindly to everything you encounter in life. Life ain't super complicated once you understand how to use basic principles, once you understand how to think. But until and unless you get there, it becomes impossibly difficult because you're never going to succeed. It does require a certain amount of mental effort, of course, over a period of time to understand the principles of thought, the laws of logic, but it's not infinitely complex. Anybody with a normal, intact, functioning brain can read Aristotle or Ayn Rand and learn the law of identity, the law of causality, how to use logic.
Mike, what about, we mentioned steroids. Just your opinion about the legality of them and whatnot. We've got people like Dan Duchesne, who's a real character, and he just doesn't see any need for these drugs to be illegal, and now they're controlled substances and whatnot, and you literally could go to any pro bodybuilding contest and pick these guys off the stage and arrest them for internal possession of a controlled substance or suspicion of internal possession of a controlled substance, because you literally can't look like a pro bodybuilder without using steroids, in my opinion, and I don't know anyone who's done it.
No, you can't. I tell those who ask me about steroids, I say, look, it's debatable possibly whether or not there's a health issue here, whether or not steroids pose a real strong risk to your physical well-being. What cannot be debated is that there is a legal risk.
Yeah.
Now, what's the purpose of all goal achievement ultimately is to achieve happiness, self-esteem, confidence, inner serenity. If you're walking around all day long, Bill, with a knot of anxiety in your gut, fearful that you're being watched by the feds, then you're achieving the opposite of the desired result. Big muscles are important, people, but it's a reality that there is a real legal risk here. Now, I have some reason to understand that the feds have lessened or diminished their march on this thing. But they're still out there. I'm not so sure it's worth it. Why not try training? Why not try training naturally for a while?
Well, I'll tell you, that's the thing that I really try to get across to the people that I know and the people that read the magazine is it is debatable, in my opinion, as to what the risks are for the proper use of anabolic steroids in normally healthy people. But it is not debatable in any way, shape, or form that if you get busted with these things, you're going to be miserable.
Without a doubt.
And I know dozens, not just one or two, but I know dozens of bodybuilders who have gone to jail or who are in jail for being involved in anabolic steroids. And
well, I see it even now. Of course, working in Gold's Gym, I see and hear all manner of things. I hear bodybuilders talking about buying and selling drugs all the time as if they had never heard of these other guys getting busted. Some of these guys are actually quite innocent, decent people.
Absolutely.
They have decided that taking drugs does not pose a serious enough health threat to deter them from taking them.
Right.
So they decided to do it. But they continue to overlook the legal risk. And then sometimes I have to giggle and kind of marvel at their innocence and ignorance. These feds aren't joking. Yeah. They will put you in jail. It's not just a threat. Yeah. As Bill Phillips just said, dear listener, dozens of people have been put in jail. Some of these people are innocent, decent, upstanding people.
Family people, guys with college degrees and real-life careers. I mean, all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've got shackles on and you're sitting in a cell.
Now, what was that one issue I brought up earlier? When people don't know how to think, when they don't take the time to sit down, look out into the world, and identify and evaluate what's going on, which is something you can't do, by the way, if you don't have a sufficiently developed conceptual faculty. You have to have the concepts, the ideas, the words necessary to identify and evaluate the facts. Then what happens? you're opening up the path to any dictator who wants to come in and tell you what to do.
Yep.
And that's what's happening. We are progressively losing our freedoms, without a doubt. Now they're going after the supplement industry.
Right.
As I'm not a fan of nutritional supplements, but I would fight to defend their right to sell that stuff.
Right.
I think people should be informed about which ones to take and not to take if they need them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the government has no right to legislate our lives. Who is the government anyway? Their track record ain't so great. They ain't the greatest thinkers in the world.
Right. What about you brought up supplements. Why don't I ask you a question that people would ask if they had the chance is, Mike, have you ever used any supplements, vitamins, protein, and do you recommend them to the people that you train one-on-one down at Gold's Gym?
When I was quite young, when I first started bodybuilding, I, like most people, read muscle magazines as if they were sacred scripture. I fell for their advertising blandishments, hook, line, and sinker. I took every protein powder, vitamin you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember my brother and I bring this up occasionally, and we laugh about it. Remember the stuff Huffman used to sell called protein from the sea?
That was probably before my time, actually.
Well, some of you older listeners remember that. You're probably giggling because that was the most vile stuff I had ever smelled or tasted in my life, and a couple of times I remember my brother regurgitating the stuff after trying to get it down.
Is it a kelp or something, or?
No, it was some kind of fish that they freeze-dried and powdered or something or other. But later I went on to more seriously investigate the science of nutrition. I read several reputable nutritional scientists' works on the subject and came to understand that while the subject of nutrition is often confusing for people, it's actually quite simple. And I'm not seeking to oversimplify the subject of nutrition even slightly, Bill, when I say that all the individual really has to be concerned with is in obtaining a well-balanced diet daily. A well-balanced diet, by definition, listener, is one that provides your body with all the nutrients and calories it needs. Now, here's the important follow-up, Bill. The human body does not utilize nutrients beyond need. What happens when you consume more water than you need? You excrete it.
Right.
You don't have that same luxury with proteins, fats, and carbs because they contain calories.
Wouldn't that be nice, huh?
Yeah. What happens when you consume more calories than you need?
Fat.
Okay, now what do you need? Here's the important follow-up. What do you need calories and nutrients for in this context? To maintain your existing physical mass, number one, and number two, to provide for that negligible, this is the key term here, to provide for that negligible bit of growth that takes place even at best on a workout-to-workout basis. Bill, let's say you had the required genetics. You were going to train properly in the course of the next year, eat adequately, and gain 30 pounds of muscle. That is certainly a best-case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
As great as that is, 30 pounds of muscle, it only averages out to about an ounce a day, slightly more than an ounce. Realistically, Bill, how much extra protein, how many calories beyond your maintenance level do you really think you would need to provide for a mere 1 ounce of muscle growth a day, most of which is water?
Right.
Muscle is not mostly protein, it's mostly water, up to 72% in healthy individuals.
Right.
Not very much. In fact, I can explain to you how you can figure it out for yourself down to the exact calorie. It just so happens to be true that a pound of muscle, anybody's muscle, yours, mine, Joe Weider's, Jim Mannion's, whoever, contains about 600 calories. If you were to surgically remove a pound of your muscle and place it in a scientific measuring device known as a bomb calorimeter, it would yield 600 units of heat energy. Now, you're going to gain 30 pounds this year, right?
Dreaming.
How many extra calories beyond your maintenance requirements would you require in the course of a year? Would you need in the course of a year?
1,800?
18,000.
18,000.
You were a little weak in arithmetic. That's okay. So was I, but I loved English. 18,000 extra calories above your maintenance requirements per year. Not 18,000 extra calories a day, a week, or a month. 18,000 extra calories a year. Now, The listener, of course, is looking to devise or formulate for himself a daily dietary regimen, which is difficult to do based on yearly caloric considerations. In order to find out how many calories he would need daily beyond his maintenance requirements to provide for up to 30 pounds of muscle growth in a year, he would divide the number of days in a year, 365, into 18,000, and it comes out to 48 extra calories a day. Above maintenance requirements, only 48.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's been hypothesized that that's not perfectly accurate because there has to be some metabolic cost in the buildup of new muscle tissue. And if that's true, I don't know that it is, but taking that into account with whatever degree of accuracy we can, all right, triple it. 48 times 3 is 147. You need 147 calories a day above your maintenance requirements to provide for the gains on a daily basis that would result in a 30-pound gain of muscle in the course of a year. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily that everybody sit down and figure out their daily calorie intake down to the exact calorie. I bring this up to point out that you don't have to force feed yourself hundreds of extra grams of protein a day beyond need or thousands of extra calories. All you really have to do is consume a well-balanced diet, which again, by definition, is one that provides your body with all the nutrients it needs, and the human body does not utilize nutrients beyond need.
Right.
If you needed 25 milligrams of vitamin C a day, for instance, and you were to take a vitamin C supplement that gave you up to, let's say, 3,000 milligrams a day, that would not force your body to utilize even one more milligram than it needs, or 26. The concept of need is crucially important in the context of both nutrition and training. An individual should not train beyond need, Bill. Remember, we're looking for the least, the precise amount necessary. Any more than that is overtraining.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, the individual should not consume calories and nutrients beyond need. Now, what does he need those again for? For maintaining his existing physical mass and provide for that little bit of growth that takes place even at best on a workout-to-workout basis. And even at best is negligible. You're not going to gain 5 pounds a week or 20 pounds a month in most cases unless you're grossly underweight to begin with. At best, you're going to gain probably 30 pounds of muscle in a year. The average bodybuilder would probably be more realistic to expect to gain 10 to 15 pounds of muscle in a year, which actually ain't bad. Some people scoff at that. They think it's perhaps not even worth considering, when in fact it's a considerable amount of tissue. Take a moment, dear listener, and visualize sitting in front of you on your dinner table a single individual 1-pound beefsteak. You know how big a single pound of steak is. Now imagine 12 of them. That's a lot of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Now take 1 pound and put it on your left pec. Take another pound and put it on your right pec.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to sustain that rate of growth, 12 pounds a year for 2 years, of course, you'd end up with 24 pounds of muscle. Imagine 24 individual 1-pound beefsteaks sitting in front of you on your dinner table. That's a lot.
That's for sure.
Now, interesting to note here, most bodybuilders, Bill, are already grossly overnourished. They're getting a lot more protein than they need for maintenance or growth, more vitamins, more minerals, more carbohydrates, and they're still not growing.
Right.
This is a clear indication that nutrition is not the problem. If you're overnourished, by definition, you've covered all your nutritional bases. You're overnourished. What could possibly be missing? Now, if you were to point this out to most bodybuilders, it would have little impact on their consciousness. They seem to be running around with some fuzzy notion that they're missing some magical supplement or magical combination of nutrients. If you're overnourished or even just well-nourished, consuming a well-balanced diet, then you've covered all your nutritional bases. What could you possibly be missing? See my point?
Mm-hmm. So where do you think the concept of this high-calorie force feeding thing came from?
A guy named John Perillo, apparently, who a while back made the capricious assertion that there is no such thing as overtraining, only undereating, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I read that.
His approach to bodybuilding, by the way, is the antithesis of mine. I call my approach a rational approach. With a rational approach to bodybuilding, you understand the crucial significance of the concept need. The concept of need is of crucial epistemological importance, which means intellectual or logical importance. If you don't understand the concept of need, you can't formulate a proper theory of bodybuilding, of training and nutrition. You should not train beyond need. If you do, you overtrain and lose muscle.
Right.
If you eat, consume calories and nutrients beyond need, you grow fat.
That's for sure.
With Perillo's approach, you end up losing muscle and gaining fat. It's an irrational approach. It's the black hole of bodybuilding. Remember I brought up the concept of a black hole?
Right.
I said this is not a dark age. Dark is dark. Black is black. That approach is literally black, and that is the black hole of bodybuilding. It's the antithesis of mine. It's an irrational approach.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to train beyond need. That is overtraining. You don't want to consume nutrients beyond need. That's overeating. It leads to the deposition of body fat. It achieves the exact opposite of the desired result.
That's for sure.
That idea contradicts every well-established fact in this context, in the context of building a better body, using weights, and eating an adequate, well-balanced diet. If you were to go to medical school or college to study nutritional science, you would understand, you would come to understand, you would learn what I stated to you at the outset of this portion, that all the individual really has to be concerned with regarding nutrition is in getting a well-balanced diet every day. This is something you probably learned about, as I did, Bill, and many of the listeners in high school. Our high school health teachers taught us that we should get well-balanced diets. It was determined at the end of World War II by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, presumably an unbiased, objective organization with no vested interest in hawking nutritional supplements to the unenlightened, by the way, that a well-balanced diet could be obtained by the individual consuming a certain number of portions each day from the 4 basic food groups: cereals and grains, fruits and vegetables, meat, fish and poultry, milk and dairy products.
Mm-hmm.
If an individual is overnourished and he's not making progress, then it's obvious nutrition ain't the problem. The problem is lack of a proper training methodology. In fact, most bodybuilders have this reversed. They have failed to understand the actual relationship between training and nutrition. They have it reversed. Training is the first requirement, not nutrition.
Right.
It is only within the context of first having stimulated growth through proper training that nutrition then becomes a consideration.
Absolutely.
You can take all the amino acids or Metrex or vitamins or whatever else they're selling here these days. I don't care how much you take, in what quantities. You can consume the greatest diet in the world, figured out by the most sophisticated supercomputer. If you don't give your body a good reason to grow, if you don't enact the necessary causes, those causes required to set the growth process into motion, and if you don't properly regulate the volume and frequency of your training so that you're not preventing the body from producing the increase, then it doesn't matter what you eat.
Right.
Or what you don't eat. It doesn't matter. Training is the first requirement. Nutrition is only a secondary factor.
Right. Unless, yeah. Now, I think that's one of the things we're trying to get across in Muscle Media is that we've never touted one of these high-calorie diets. We continually try to deprogram these people who believe that the more they eat, the bigger they're going to get. And one of the things that they're onto is that they haven't seen any change in their bodies for so long. They go on one of these high-calorie diets, and they notice their, clothes are tighter. And they go, this is really working for me. And it's like...
They're getting fatter.
It can be years. Sometimes it's months. Sometimes it's just a few days. But oftentimes it's several years before they really realize that they haven't gained any muscle, that the only difference in their body is that they've gained fat, and they look much worse when their goal was to look better.
Right.
And I think we're trying to help people learn that through Muscle Media. Another thing we've also constantly emphasized, another thing that Dr. Conley started in the magazine is making it patently clear that without the proper training stimulus, no adaptation will occur of any kind.
The greatest anti-catabolic is not overtraining.
Yeah, I agree. We talk about limiting catabolism and cortisol in the body to try to let the muscle tissue grow and not be broken down. And that is an excellent point. The greatest thing that you can do to prevent catabolism, cortisol elevations, is to not overtrain.
Not overtrain.
Yep.
Overtraining, I'm beginning to see, Bill, is the most crucial issue in bodybuilding and actually all athletics. A lot of exercise physiologists have expended an enormous amount of time and energy looking to discover the stimulus, to discover and understand the nature of the stimulus responsible for inducing muscle growth beyond normal levels, but they spent a lot less time, not sufficient time, studying the importance of regulating the volume and frequency of training so that the individual doesn't overtrain and thus prevent the body from producing the increase.
Right.
You have to understand that the workout doesn't produce the increase. As Arthur Jones pointed out brilliantly years ago, the only change that a workout can produce is an injury.
Yeah.
If you impose upon your body a force greater than the structural or integrity of the body can withstand, an injury will be produced. The body produces the growth during the rest period.
Right.
It only stands to reason if the rest period is not sufficiently long, i.e. if there are any more sets or any more workouts conducted or performed in a given unit of time than required to stimulate the increase. To that extent, you overtrain, and to the extent that you overtrain, you will hamper and possibly prevent the production of the increase.
Right.
The body produces the increase after the workout, but that takes time. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. Proper training methodology is the most important thing by far.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, without that initial stimulus, and then without, like you said, nutrition is whether people want to do it through some type of supplement that makes it more convenient and easy to get the regular feedings they need with their busy lifestyles, and a food distribution system that is as fucked up as anything you can imagine, where the most available forms of food in this society and the most inexpensive are the highest in fat and lowest in nutrients.
Right.
And the highest in calories. So you want to talk about something that's screwed up.
Yeah.
And people that want to be health conscious and build their bodies and be healthy and not put on fat, body fat like the bodybuilders want to avoid it's an important thing that they can get to the food that they need. And, this country's food distribution system is not good. It really isn't. And the more...
Well, in large part because of government regulation.
Well, something's screwed up because, like you say, there's a trend where, human beings are living longer, but I predict within the next decade, life expectancy of people in this country, at least, will start to decline because of the way they're fed. So let's say that nutrition for the bodybuilder is a given if he assumes that, or if that bodybuilder can make the decision not to, fall for the fraud in this country's food distribution system, that they somehow get, a high nutrient, calorie compact diet, whether it's through supplementation or by being wise enough to choose the right foods. Let's say that that's a given. Now I want to ask you some questions about specific training with the nutrition set to the side and saying, okay, high nutrients, low in calories, you and I both agree on that. And let me get some specific information on training.
Okay.
Now, the guy that's starting your program, let's say you're training him, or let's say it's me, I work out on Monday. And I want to know how to group my body parts. And I think last time we talked about training chest and back together.
Chest and back on the same day.
Okay, now I want to go in and I'm going to warm up the chest muscles by doing maybe 2 sets of 10 with 135 pounds on the bench press.
Well, it's difficult, if not impossible, to give everybody a perfect warming up program because warm-up needs vary, Bill. They vary according to the individual's age, his existing physical condition, and even the temperature of the gym can affect warm-up needs. But there is a general principle here that will serve as an effective guideline, and the principle is this. Perform any amount of warming up that you believe to be minimally required. What you have learned through experience is minimally required so that you're secure in the knowledge you can proceed to the intense portion of the workout and not injure yourself.
Okay. So it's an individual thing, and it's something that most experienced lifters will come to recognize as,
almost immediately, yeah.
Okay.
Now, it's also true here that the program that I recommend is a high-intensity, low to moderate force exercise program. It is not a powerlifting program, i.e. high-intensity, high force. I am not recommending people to do 1 to 3 rep maximums.
Right.
I recommend that they do 6 to 10 reps to failure. If an individual is performing his sets with a weight that allows 6 to 10 reps in reasonably strict fashion, it's not very likely he's going to hurt himself.
Mm-hmm.
The first several reps, in other words, serve as a further warm-up.
Yeah, it's true.
If he was a power lifter, training in such a way that he's doing 1 to 3 reps, then he'd have to do a different kind of a warming-up program.
Right.
But this is not powerlifting. We're not looking to demonstrate strength here. We're looking to build strength and size, a different type of training.
Right.
So don't worry about getting injured with this type of training program. I get a lot of questions on this. And the best way to answer it is by pointing out again that this is a high-intensity, low to moderate force exercise regimen.
Mm-hmm. What about, okay, like I said, for me, I need a few sets, maybe 2-3 sets of, moderate weight bench pressing and things like that, and then I'm ready to go into my one set, where I do flies and then incline press.
Uh-huh.
That's what you would recommend?
Yep.
Okay, I do flies, and it seems like next thing you know, I pick up a weight that I think I'm only going to be able to get 10 times, but if I honestly push myself, I come up with 22 reps. And then I drop that, and I go straight to the incline press, and...
say that again?
I think I keep underestimating my strength, and I talk to another number of other people who say, they're ending up in a high rep mode.
Oh, okay.
Just...
All right.
Like I...
The 6 to 10 reps is merely a guideline figure.
Mm-hmm.
What is the stimulus? Remember in the first tape I went into some detail about the nature of the stimulus responsible for inducing muscle growth beyond normal levels in human beings. It's that last rep.
Yes.
When you're trying as hard as you can and you're barely able to make it. The rep that requires 100% intensity of effort.
Right.
That rep is very special. There is something that goes on physiologically during that last rep when you're trying as hard as you can. There is something that goes on physiologically that is responsible for flipping on the growth machinery inside the muscle cell.
Right.
Whether it's 6 reps or 10 reps or 15 or perhaps even 20. I don't know much. I don't pretend to have given much thought to the subject of rep range. I'm not sure that anybody has given it sufficient thought to make a real strong pronouncement about it. My advice is choose a weight that allows you to perform approximately 6 to 10 reps in reasonably strict fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say in a given workout, however, Bill, you're doing curls, and by the 8th rep, you clearly recognize you're not going to get 9 or 10 to failure.
Right.
You're not going to fail at 9 or 10. You're going to fail at 13 or 14. That's okay. Don't stop and reload at number 8. Go to failure at 13 or 14 or even 15. Don't do even a half a set more than is suggested. When I say it's easy to overtrain, I mean it's very easy to overtrain. You wouldn't want your anesthesiologist to give you even a little bit more anesthesia than is required, would you?
No.
It's the concept of specificity once again.
Well, so then the next time you just need to gauge and use a heavier weight to begin with so that you don't end up pumping out 20 reps.
Right.
Okay.
Now, I know you were spreading a little bit thick there for your listeners. It's doubtful that you were going to 22 reps on a regular basis because you have the knowledge, the experience to know approximately what weight you'll need. But and that's true for most of the listeners. When they start this, they may have a little difficulty at first, but after the first workout or two, they should be able to arrive at a weight that will get them approximately 6 to 10. And again, 6 to 10 is a suggested guideline.
Right.
If in another workout you're doing curls again, and by the 3rd rep you see you're not going to fail at 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, but at 4 or 5, don't stop and reload there either. Fail at 4 or 5. Your next workout you'll get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or even more.
Now, here's a key question. Every single workout, I should increase either weight or reps.
Right.
And what if I can't?
Then you're doing something wrong. If you're not making progress, there's a reason, like there's a reason for everything in this universe, including lack of bodybuilding progress. If you're not making progress, then you're violating either 1, two or all three of the principles of the theory of high-intensity training, the one and only valid theory of productive bodybuilding exercise. If you're not making progress, then either number one, you're not training intensely enough to stimulate the increase.
Right.
And or number two, you're doing so many sets, and or number three, so many workouts, your workouts are not brief and infrequent enough, you're preventing the body from producing any increase that might have been stimulated as a result of the workout.
Mm-hmm. Now, do I necessarily need to feel a pump to get a good workout? I mean, some people are, convinced.
Well, you will get some degree of pump no matter what kind of a program you follow, including heavy-duty, high-intensity training. I have had quite a few people report to me that they actually get a better pump.
Mm-hmm.
Because their body's nutritive equilibrium is not so upset by the gross overtraining, they tend to store more glycogen in the muscle, or keep more glycogen stored in the muscle with this type of training, and that's an important factor in the pump.
Right. Is
your body's nutritive equilibrium, how much glycogen you have in the body being one factor. But it doesn't matter whether you get a pump or not. Getting a pump is not a surefire sign or indication that you stimulated growth. If it was, Bill, then most of the bodybuilders who have been around for some time all of them would have 22-inch arms or more, because most bodybuilders, all bodybuilders, get pumped every time they work out.
Almost.
But they don't grow every time they work out.
Okay, so I don't need to watch for a pump to know that I've got enough exercise. Because a lot of bodybuilders go to the gym and say...
I get that a lot. Let me elaborate on that just a little bit for the listener, because I get it from so very many people. The pump is only temporary.
Mm-hmm.
The pump is nothing more than the mechanical pumping of the blood and fluids into the muscle. They get into the muscle faster than they can exit. It feels good. You are bigger temporarily, but it goes away. Getting a pump is not necessary to stimulate muscle growth. There is something that goes on neuromuscularly on the last rep of a set carried to failure, which is very special. There is something that goes on physiologically once again in that particular phenomenon that is responsible for flipping on the growth machinery inside the muscle cell. It has little or nothing to do with the pump.
Right.
I see bodybuilders get pumped all the time. I see very few bodybuilders who grow all the time.
Right.
If getting a pump was a surefire sign of growth stimulation, every bodybuilder in the world would be spectacularly successful, because they all get pumped, sometimes a little bit better than others.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, what about a soreness is another thing that bodybuilders are often watched for to try to measure. I get pretty sore after these one-set workouts. Is that a good sign, or?
That's another, here we're talking about feelings, an interesting philosophical phenomenon. Most people don't know how to identify their feelings anyway.
Mm-hmm.
This is a conceptual theory of bodybuilding. It's not a theory or system or guideline based on feelings or instincts. Nobody knows what produces or causes muscular soreness. No one really knows quite what it is, except that it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one knows what it is, it shouldn't figure centrally into an individual's thinking. It should not affect the way they guide their training efforts even slightly. I mean, how could you anyway? If you didn't get sore after a given workout, what do you do the next workout? Bend over backwards so you get sore? Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get sore, then what the hell are you going to do the next workout? Try to get sore?
Mm-hmm.
For what reason? If getting sore, Bill, was an absolute requirement or an indication that growth, or if getting sore was a requirement of getting bigger, of stimulating growth, I never would have been Mr. Universe, because I almost never got sore.
Really?
The only time I got sore, and this is true for most people, including you, 99.9%, if not 100% of all of you, most people only get sore after a layoff, or if they make a radical change in their exercises, or if they include exercises that involve more stretching.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't you that your chest gets very sore when you add dumbbell flies, when they stretch
right
in the extended position?
Definitely.
You don't have to get sore after a workout. Getting sore is not a sign that you did anything positive for yourself. It just hurts.
Mm-hmm. So it is...
Don't worry about the pump, and don't worry about soreness. They are feelings that are not all that important.
Okay, so either one of them, you might get a pump, you might not. You might get sore, and you might not from an effective workout.
Yeah, if you're gauging your workouts by your feelings, by whether or not you're getting a pump or getting sore, then you're addicted to those feelings.
Right.
What you should be guided by is not feelings, which you're barely able to identify the significance of, but by your knowledge. Your knowledge of the theory of high-intensity training, the one and only possible valid theory of productive bodybuilding exercise.
Now, how do you know when to train again? Let's say I worked out Monday, and what do? You take off Tuesday, you train again.
Bill, I can tell you without a doubt, it's always a mistake to train 2 days in a row.
Okay, I agree with that.
You have to understand that, again, the body doesn't grow during the workout, it grows during the rest period.
Right.
We have learned through observation that training 2 days is always a mistake because 24 hours between workouts is not enough time to allow for full recovery and full growth.
Right.
The first thing you do after a workout, Bill, is not grow but recover.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Put back what was used up. When you're done working out, you don't feel the same as you did before the workout, do you?
Right.
You're exhausted. Something was used up. The first thing your body will do after the workout, therefore, is devote its energy and resources to recovery or compensate for the exhaustive effects of the workout. That takes time. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It can take up to several days for some people. It is only once the body has fully compensated for the exhaustive effects of the workout, i.e. recovered, that it will then devote its energy and resources to overcompensation, or putting back a little bit more than was there before the workout. Remember, recovery is compensation, putting back what was used up. Growth is overcompensation, putting back a little bit more than was there before the workout. Do you see what would happen, Bill, if you were to work out again before compensation is fully completed?
You would destroy the opportunity to make
overcompensate.
Yeah.
Overcompensate. Even if you're working different muscle groups. Remember from the first tape, I emphasized that in addition to having a localized effect on the muscle you're working, exercise also has a systemic effect. It affects the whole body, the entire physical system. I have seen with my phone consultation clients and my in-the-gym clients that they do best on an every 72 to 96 hour program.
Okay, so I can train my chest on Monday, then again on Friday, or wait a minute.
No. You would train your chest and back on Monday.
Okay.
Take Tuesday and Wednesday off, and on Thursday, and on an every 72-hour program, you would do your shoulders and arms.
Right.
Then you would take Friday and Saturday off, and on Sunday, train your legs.
Okay.
Now, the next week, Bill, you would not train Monday. You would take Monday and Tuesday off, train Wednesday.
Right.
Every 72 hours.
Breaking the body up into 3 groups.
Right.
That's just one way to do it.
Now, I don't have everybody doing this. There are those individuals, remember, that don't tolerate high-intensity exercise as well as others.
Mm-hmm.
In those cases, especially, overtraining often results from overlapping. When I see certain individuals not making satisfactory progress on the program I just recommended, I eliminate as much overlap as I can. I'll take the shoulders and arms out of the program entirely, consolidate it into a basic compound exercise routine, focusing on the major muscle groups, the chest and the back, and the legs.
Mm-hmm.
The chest work indirectly and even directly stimulates the shoulders and triceps.
Right.
And the back work does the same thing with the biceps. I have had clients that have made better progress with their shoulders and arms after eliminating specific exercises for those areas. Remember, overtraining is often the result of overlapping. When I say it's easy to overtrain, I ain't joking.
Right.
I used to say years ago, Bill, that high-intensity, heavy-duty training was like going out into the intense August sun. You'll get a suntan every time you go out, but even 1 minute more exposure than required or needed. Remember the importance of the concept need? 1 minute more than is needed, you'll get a sunburn. Then I came to understand a few years ago that I was wrong. It's more demanding than high-intensity sunlight in August. It's more like going out into the intense August sun with the sun 5 million miles closer to the Earth.
Right.
Do you see where that would necessitate a reduced volume and frequency of exposure?
Yep.
Now, just recently, I amended it again, and I'm not spreading it thick here to make a point. high-intensity, heavy-duty training. Weight training in general is not like going out into the intense August sun. It's more like jumping into a fire. It'll warm you up, but 1 minute more exposure than required, it'll burn you.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be careful with this stuff. Remember, science is an exacting discipline. You wouldn't expect the director to yell down to the end of the control module down there at Nassau to throw a blue switch instead of the red one.
Right.
You wouldn't want your anesthesiologist to give you any more anesthesia than is precisely required. What we're looking for here is the exact, the precise, the specific amount of exercise required. Any more than that is overtraining.
Right. Well, Mike, I'm getting the flash from the tape. We're getting ready to run out of time. Again, I think we're going to end up doing part 3.
Okay. I enjoyed it again also.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell people in the Audiotape summary how to get your books.
Okay.
They should really get the whole course. You have the nutrition book, the heavy-duty book, and a training log. We didn't even get to talk about how important it is to keep a training journal, but they can read about that in your book. And article coming up in the next issue of Muscle Media 2000.
I would also like to add real quickly here, my thanks to you and to the scores of individuals that were so enthusiastic in their response. The ones who wrote me letters, sent me faxes, and called me to, if not get a phone consultation, then to let me know how much they appreciated that first tape. It was much appreciated.
They're a good group of people. I really know that they are a good group of people. I've had the opportunity to meet some of them, and I'm glad.
They prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that bodybuilders, not all bodybuilders are dumb.
Right.
At Muscle Media 2000, we're always glad to hear from you. Write to Muscle Media 2000 at Box 277, Golden, Colorado, 80402-0277. Or call our customer service department in Golden, Colorado at 1-800-615-8500.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. There's plenty more from the Muscle Media 2000 audio tape series that I have to get through. But before we do, next week's video is actually going to be covering a contest from the 1970s. And this time I'm going to stray away from the professional league, and we're going to cover an amateur contest. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like more bodybuilding content, check out my Instagram page, and that's @RetroMuscleMags. Okay, see you guys next week.